Hey everyone, as you heard me talking about last week, I've got a lot of projects. Well, I've got a lot of computer projects as well. And in those computer projects, I have a series of different types of equipment. I've got NAS, I've got a storage space that I run off my Windows machine. It's got 4 drives in it. I've got a bunch of USB drives that I use for various purposes. For example, all of the generative AI stuff that I've got exists on a drive. Right now they're backed up. Things go to the NAS. That's the purpose of getting a NAS, is to have something beefier to store everything on. But all those little drives can have issues with them. They will eventually die, especially the small USB ones. Now you can get some bigger USB ones. The backup types that they usually have are not the small drives. They're the bigger, heavier drives that would exist inside a desktop computer. They're a little less sensitive to heat, but they're made with thicker materials, tougher materials than the little 2.5-inch drives that they put inside a laptop. SSDs are a completely different beast. So we'll put that aside for right now. If you've got computer equipment, and as you've heard from my projects, I'm a mixed house. I have Linux boxes, I have Windows boxes. I've got a Windows desktop. I just swapped out a Windows desktop into Linux because I wanted to make a gaming server up to host a game. I've got a Windows laptop. I've got tablet computers, and I've got a couple of Linux boxes. Some are laptop based. But what they all have in common is they have drives in them. And as I've seen on the Linux ones, those drives can fail. And Linux doesn't seem to be quite as friendly on some of the failures. I think I've had better recoveries off the Windows boxes than I have had off the Linux boxes so far. That said, you're going to want to have some way of knowing how long those drives are going to last. I have some very old equipment that I use because I've got it. It's still functional, so I'll throw Linux on it and put it aside as a test bed or as a DNS server, for example. I used to use a Raspberry Pi as a DNS server until its little SD card fried. And then I moved over to something that was a little beefier that I wouldn't have to worry about it failing quite so much. But that's an old laptop, right? As I said, sometimes it's very easy to get things online because you can get them from replacements where somebody was a gamer and they swapped out their old stuff and they know how to take their computers apart. So they took the motherboard out, might have probably taken the CPU out, may take the memory with it. They'll just take that whole section out, pop in a new board that they put together. And now what do they do with the old one? They sell it. I have one coming right now that is basically the same as a computer that I'm using here and have been for, 6 years, I think, at this point. But it's an i9 processor in it. It's going to be enough for what I want to use it for. But when you use old hardware like that, you need to know how long it's going to last. For example, I've got an old 3.5-inch drive, so an internal desktop computer drive. And it's been okay. It had some issues, and I reformatted it, and it's been fine. But, it's one of those things that I'm not using as a primary drive. It's kind of a secondary drive. When I first set up my Jellyfin server, I was using very old equipment, wasn't sure how long those drives were going to last, so I had everything backing up to something else. And I've got a bunch of old drives around here that I've retired that I use for temporary storage for things. They're not being written to that often, so it's more of a just store it over there type of thing. But you need to know how long your drives are going to last. Now, if you're a complete Windows shop and you want something simple and free. You can go to the Windows Store and you can get Crystal Disk Info, which will give you a tab across the top, which isn't big enough for me because I've got a lot of drives. But that tab will tell you what the health is of the drive at a glance, as well as the temperature that the drive's running at. As you know, these things need to be cooled. Even the external USBs can overheat. Having a way of knowing what the temperatures are on those drives lets me know if I need to put a fan over them, right? Something to help to cool them off. I like to put them in some kind of racks. I've got them in a 3D printed configuration at this point, a little stand configuration where I've got them in shelves. So like a little server rack. But they're open to the air on most of it. They've got the bottom isn't. I've had some that I've got on racks that I literally have a metal rack, almost like a baking rack. It's a shelving unit, but the shelves are like a baking rack. So the air gets all the way around them, except for a couple of places where they sit on the metal bars. Sitting on the metal bars is going to help them dissipate the heat. So it's a good situation to put those USB drives on, if you can put them in that situation. So I also have a storage space box that has 4 drives in it, and it doesn't have any kind of cooling. So those are running a little hotter than I would like them to be, which means now I can go to a USB fan or something and put it near them and help cool that unit off. But I can see what the temperature is going to be like, right? But what if you're not just a Windows house? I'm not. So I have another program called Hard Drive Sentinel, which if you go look them up, you'll realize it hasn't been updated since 2023, but it works. You can still get a license for it, and the license is cheap. I think I paid $60 for a 5 computer license. Now I've got a couple of Windows boxes, so that's why I went for the bigger licensing. The Linux ones are free. So while it's on Windows, it gives you a little thing in your little tray that shows you what the health and temperature is of each of the drives. When you pop it up, you see each one color-coded with a number in the middle of that square color coding that tells you what the temperature is. Hover over it, it'll tell you what the health of the drive is. So it allows you to get a quick look at what the drive health looks like. The laptop drives, which is also what they use for those USB drives, thin ones, you're probably looking at about 2+ years on those, maybe 5, probably pushing it at that point. And that's because, at least in a laptop, where it's being moved around a lot and things, those drives degrade. Plus, being in a laptop, you've got different heating things. You also have a fan in there, but they can still overheat because the fan may not be blowing across the drives. Myriad of other things, but those drives don't have quite the same life expectancy as the bigger ones, which is why when you go see like a Western Digital backup that's USB, it's a big beefy unit because it's got a 3.5-inch drive in it. It's got one of the big drives in there. But you've got your stuff and you've got it backed up, which I hope you do. What happens if the drive fails? Will you know when the drive fails? And how long is the backup drive going to last? If you've got a primary and a secondary drive and they're the same drive, right? You're writing to one constantly, and the other one maybe you're backing up every night or every week to, right? If that's the case and you're backing things up on a nightly basis to that drive, you're not writing to it as much, which means that isn't as quite as heat sensitive because it's not running that much. It's just running for however long the backup has to go. And if it's just backing up the new stuff, you don't even really have to worry about how much that's backing up. But your primary drive's being written to much more. If you mirror the two drives, meaning what writes to one writes to the other immediately, and you got both drives at the same time, they've got both the same life expectancy. They're both probably going to fail at the same time. It's kind of like your headlights in your car. If you change out the headlight, you're hoping that one headlight dies before the other, so that when you swap it out, that one headlight's a little bit newer than the other one. So when the older one fails, you still have a functioning headlight, right? Had a car where both headlights failed on me one night. Not a great situation, right? When it's nighttime and your headlights fail. So if you're going to use something as a backup, probably want to make sure that it's just getting written to on a nightly basis and not being mirrored, unless it's in a NAS, which is a completely different type of drive that's in there. They're built for longer term. They also have things called security drives that are made for hooking up to security video, because security video will be streaming constantly to those drives. So they need to be built a little bit differently. They're going to cost you more money, but they need to be built a little differently in order to hold up to that. But this Crystal Disk Info will give you that information. So will another one called Hard Drive Sentinel, which, as I said, has those little boxes that show up there. When you run it on your Linux box from the command line, it will tell you what the life expectancy is on your drives. I've got a drive here that I believe is about 10 years old at this point. It had issues and I retired it, but I wanted to see if it was going to work. If I reformatted it, I needed to use it on a Linux box as a temp storage space. Wasn't going to use it for very long. I just had a bunch of files that I needed to write to temporary space, so I put it there. Not knowing yet how accurate these are, it tells me it's about 20 days until that drive fails, right? Which is not unexpected to me. It's not a healthy drive. It's got blocks and things that are failing. And you might wonder, how does it know this stuff? Well, a lot of the newer drives have technology on them to keep track of the error rates on the drives. They can be tested, but they have smart technology on it. And that allows you to find out how the drive is performing and what its health really is. And from that, you can extrapolate out what the life expectancy is going to be, because it knows how long it's been running. So sometimes you'll see a drive that is better than 1,000 days. Excellent. That's what you want to see, right? You want your drives to be lasting multiple years. But I've got one that says 20 some odd days, and I got another that says about 80 days, and that's an SSD. Now, SSDs are a different beast. I don't know if again, with this Hard Drive Sentinel, how accurate that's going to be. I've read online mixed reviews on that, basically saying it's not completely accurate. But hey, if I'm under 100 days, I want to have a backup sitting around that I clone my existing drive, because this SSD is a root drive, that I've got it cloned to another spot, so that if the drive fails, all I have to do is pop a new SSD in and replace it, right? Quick and easy. But I won't be able to do that if I don't know when it's going to fail. It's already failed on me once after I put Linux on it. I put Linux on there. I put the game server on there that I wanted. And then I added a DVD drive to the box, and it immediately failed. Don't know why. The Superblocks came back saying that none of them were valid when it tried to restore the machine. So I rebuilt the drive. The drive rebuilt fine. I pulled it out. I didn't have a backup for it yet because I literally just put the thing together. This was a Windows box, but the Windows box was starting to have a couple of odd glitches, and I couldn't update it from Windows 10 to a Windows 11. So the computer still works. It's got a good amount of memory in it. Why throw the box away? So I put it in there. The drive is probably having issues to begin with, the SSD drive. And it might be accurate that it's 80 days, and it might not be. But I know that the drive was having issues. It didn't surprise me that it had an issue on Linux. It just surprised me that I couldn't restore back into it with all the Superblocks that it had that were available, and none of them worked. I was disappointed in that, but I've got a backup drive for it. I've got it ready to go, and I'm set. Now, like I said, I don't see Hard Drive Sentinel running as a system device. I might have missed it, but I didn't see it in there. It is on the Windows boxes, and it's keeping track of it. On the Linux box, you have to run it every so often, and you can run it in a full-blown mode that basically pages of information. You got a good-sized block, 20, 30 lines for each drive, depending on if there's errors on it or not. Or you can run it with a dash solid on it that just gives you back a quick percentage health on it. The longer one will give you a life expectancy in days. The shorter one will give you just a percentage on it. So if you're watching the drives and you're at 80% and you keep an eye on it and you start dropping below 80%, you probably want to make sure that you've got a backup drive ready to go. Again, I don't know how accurate it's going to be on an SSD. There are other tools for SSDs. And if you have NAS units, they have their own ways of keeping track of their health. So you don't have to worry about them as much. If you're using something like Storage Spaces, which gives you that a redundant array of independent disks, by just putting the disks together, and the software in the computer is handling all of that storage and writing and all that traffic. So it's not on the box itself like it is on a NAS. It's in your computer doing that to a series of drives that it has identified as a group. You want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on those, because a failure on those is less catastrophic than a failure for a single drive, but it still can be a problem, especially if you don't have another drive you can throw in there and you have to wait to get another drive in. You have to wait for it to rebuild. You're taking a lot of time out of the cycle. But if you know the drive is going to fail, then you can go in and you can say, okay, this drive is not healthy. I need to remove the drive. And Storage Spaces, if it has enough space to move the other stuff around too, we'll just move everything off of that drive to allow you to remove it. And then when you put the new drive in, it allows you to rebuild that drive because it already moved everything off the old one. It doesn't have any loss at that point. Again, that means making sure that you have a drive's worth of space left in your storage space setup. So if you've got, let's say you've got four 4 terabyte drives, so you got 16 terabytes of space, you're going to lose some from the RAID that you put on it. So let's say you've got 12 terabytes worth of data out of the 16 that you've got in there. You've got 12 usable terabytes. Well, each one of your drives is 4 terabytes. If you cut that down to 8 terabytes from 12 of space that you're using, you've got a good solid array going on there. And if you need to swap one of the drives out, there's enough room for everything to go to so that you can swap out that drive, because you've got a 4 terabyte opening of space in the remaining drives for you to write stuff to. And then that drive can be removed, a new drive can be put in, you can start it up, and the system will recover. It'll refresh itself by moving the data around as it needs to, refilling that 4 terabyte drives with some data. Obviously, it's not going to be everything in the 4 terabyte drive. It's going to need some of that for redundant information, but it's not going to need the entire drive because you already kept yourself with a 4 terabyte cushion. So that's what I got for you guys this week. It's basically find yourself a good tool that's going to allow you to keep track of your hard drives. You should already have backups. Maybe I'll talk about the NAS that I use at a later time, but you already should have things that are being backed up either to another drive, just on a nightly schedule. It just takes everything from drive A and puts it onto drive B, or having a NAS setup to do that. I do not back up to the cloud, basically because of the amount of traffic it would take. I'm a photographer. I have a lot of stuff. I've got terabytes worth of pictures that I keep, and the last thing I want to do is try to push that amount of data over a network connection. Even if I was doing it in piece by piece, I don't know I'd ever catch up with it. But get yourself a tool that's going to allow you to monitor your computer, hard drives, and see what the life expectancy is going to be, and that'll help you going forward. And that's what I got for you guys this week. I'll talk to you all next week.